Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Breck Buccini, and I am a Solutions Specialist here at TeamLogic IT. Before we begin the presentation, I have a few housekeeping items to share with you. Today's webinar is being recorded. We are using Microsoft Teams to bring you today's webinar. TeamLogic IT is an authorized Microsoft partner and uses Teams internally and with our customers to communicate and collaborate. In today's webinar, you'll be able to ask questions in the chat box. With the number of people we have here today, we'll do our best to answer them directly. Any questions we don't get to, we will respond to by email. Today's presenter is our President and CEO, Dave Thompson. Dave has been running TeamLogic IT of San Ramon for more than 9 years and has our business focused on keeping our clients' IT systems secure and running efficiently. Today's webinar topic is remote worker infrastructures. Without further delay, Dave, take it away. And Dave will unmute his microphone here.
Thank you, Breck, and thank you, audience. I see quite a few people that I recognize, so I thank you for attending, and also some new names, so welcome to you all. In today's webinar, we're going to review some of the most common and most available infrastructures that can help support your remote workers. These infrastructures are easy to obtain, they're pretty easy to deploy, and they're easy to use, so they're quite easy to adopt. And many of these you might be using today already. Just a quick note first, in terms of TeamLogic IT, we provide managed services along with a variety of other IT services to businesses in the Tri-Valley area. The services in general provide protective maintenance, so we're doing updates and patching systems. We're doing data and system protection, so endpoint and network security, as well as information security, so things like disaster recovery and business continuity. We provide 24/7 monitoring and express reaction to any type of alerts that might come as a result of that monitoring. We provide customer support, which is personalized help. You can call in, send an email. We even have a service where you can push a button. It'll capture what's happening on your computer at the time, sends that to our elite support staff, allows them to kind of review those problems ahead of time, and then get back to you with a quick and easy solution to whatever problem you're having. And then we also provide technical review and consultations. It's all within a managed service package. And of course, in the wake of our current stay-at-home orders, these services have been extended to our clients' at-home workers, and it assures proper endpoint protection and connectivity to the company resources in a secure and an efficient manner. In the presentation today, I'm going to be discussing how specific infrastructures share data and information, and we're also going to overlay the discussion with security and efficiency ratings, so that you can look at that infrastructure from that perspective as well. You're going to be able to decide, hopefully we'll give you a little bit of information where you can decide that if the infrastructures that you're using today are suiting all your needs, or if you might want to adopt some of the additional infrastructures that we speak about today. Once we've completed the topic on infrastructure, we're going to take a look at services that you might want to consider. So these would be additional solutions that could fit within some of that infrastructure domain. If you haven't deployed these already, these ones can enhance your ability to communicate and share information internally, as well as with your clients and other stakeholders. I'll conclude the webinar with a brief discussion on productivity assurance and how remote workers can feel like they're a part of the team, even though they might be in an area where they're somewhat isolated. Before we kind of dive into the meat of things, Breck, are there any questions or issues before we begin?
No questions from the Q&A so far, but I'll leave it open for the remainder of the webinar.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Breck. Appreciate it very much. Okay, so the first of the infrastructures that we're going to look at is email. It's one of the most basic and most ubiquitous infrastructures for sharing data and information. Many people in the companies, or rather many companies, have tried to make changes and modifications to this, but email has basically been the way that it is since the days of Prodigy and AOL. I've read about those things. Hopefully it hasn't dated me too much. But now, away from the office, most people do have access to their work email, be it on their cell phones or their tablets or through a web interface. And so this makes it something that is easily accessible and easily used. In a manner of speaking, when we have that easy access, people can get to some of the work documents in a database, basically, of information that they have sent out to clients or that they've received. So they can get access to some of the work documents that they might need to complete their work. But it certainly is, kind of allows them to be mildly productive. However, if they don't have a particular document or spreadsheet that was available, something that they had sent or received, then this is going to take a productivity hit. They're going to have to reach out to someone from their organization and ask, hey, can you send me that file? And sure, it can be sent, but then it depends on what the file size is. Some organizations work with really large files, whether it's a graphics file or it might be an executable, and that many email systems limit the size of the files that can be sent, somewhere in the like 25 to 50 megabyte limit. So if you've got 500 megabyte files, sending it through email is not going to work for you. Now, we gave email a security rating of 4 because once email is on a non-company device or can be accessed through the website, the only restrictions there is just log on or password. And so, phones sometimes are not locked down as hard as they should be. And so if someone grabs that phone, they now have access to that email. And so that's, kind of, again, takes a hit on the security. We gave it an efficiency rating of 2 due to the fact that there is, again, limited information to company resources. Again, you can get to some of those documents that maybe you've sent or received in the past, but if something is sitting on a work computer or it's sitting on a server, email is not going to be able to access that. On a side note, if remote workers don't have the same setup at their home location as they do at the office, there might be improvisations that occur. And so as one example is maybe at work they've got multiple screens, but at their home they just have a single screen. So in essence, they might use, let's say, a printer as their kind of second screen. So they're printing out information that they can be looking at in a printed form while they're working on it, working on something else on the computer itself. And so that printed form kind of becomes their second screen. Well, now they've got all these printouts lying around the house, and some of this might be confidential information and documents. So that might be something that you want to consider as well. Just being very cautious or asking people to be cautious in terms of sending out that information and printing it out and having it lying around the house. Something now that kind of helps a little bit with accessing those documents would be file sharing and file sharing services. So it's almost as ubiquitous as email. File sharing came on the scene probably about, pretty heavily about 5 to 8 years ago, and it caught on quickly. What's nice about it is it's purpose built. It's not everything to everybody. It's just meant to share folders, and it works really easy. Some of the services that you might be familiar with in this area are OneDrive, Dropbox, Google Drive, and Ignite. These services provide central location that the files are stored in, and they can be accessed and sharing to most any devices whenever they're connected to the internet. One way that I've used it is to take a picture on my cell phone and then put it into that shared drive, and now I've got it on my phone. It's up at the shared drive, and you can also have synchronization where that file is also directly synchronized with the computer, so you can get at that pretty quickly. The devices offer some security through setting permissions, so you can, if you've got, sort of a company repository of file sharing, you can make a decision on which folders you want to let people have access to, maybe read only, read write, or the ability to create and delete files and folders. Most of the services are also offer encryption options so that the data is protected while it's at rest on their system or being transferred to wherever they might be viewing it and using it. We gave file sharing a security rating of 5 since the logon process is pretty simple, it's pretty direct, but similar to email, again, there is some potential vulnerabilities that can and should be shored up. We also gave it an efficiency rating of 4 because it is easy to access files that might be needed for work. However, there might be files that need to be worked on where you don't have access to the tool. And so that, sort of might limit the fact that you can get to the document, but you can't do any editing on it. But file sharing combined with email is a really good first step at enabling home workers or remote workers. Something else which isn't really an infrastructure, but is very helpful is browser synchronization. And browser synchronization is primarily available on 2 browsers in a very good and efficient manner, both Google Chrome as well as Microsoft's new Edge browser. They offer file synchronization. In order for synchronization to work, you need to log into the browser. And this is typically done just kind of in the upper right-hand corner. And in the case of Google, you need to use a Google account. In the case of Edge, you just need to have a Microsoft account. And then when you're logged into the browser, many of the personalized settings are saved within the service provider. So Google or Microsoft kind of will hold those settings. And items such as your favorites, your home page or pages, your tab arrangements, any extensions that you've put into the browser, web history, all kinds of cached information, that all gets kind of shared across the browsers and now becomes available on any other device that you have that same browser installed in and you're logged into. So just as a quick example, you may have set a favorite to the TeamLogic IT website on your home computer, or sorry, on your work computer, and you were logged in. So that gets saved as a favorite, gets cached up to the service provider. And now if you put that same browser on your telephone and you've logged into the browser, you now can quickly go to that list of favorites. You can go to the TeamLogic IT website that's saved in the favorite, and you're there. So very helpful to have that again. Yet another kind of level of enhancement, because many people will use their browser as a way to get back to saved locations, and in some cases have things like shared passwords for different websites that they allow them to log into. So people are very dependent on their web caching and their favorites. So next infrastructure I want to speak about is called Virtual Private Network, or VPN. And so we've talked about some of the shortcomings in some of the previous services where there might be files that are stored on a local server or a local storage device within the office itself. In that context, people are only able to get to those documents while they're in the office. Virtual Private Network, or VPN, is an infrastructure that can be deployed, which allows remote workers to securely connect to the office network anywhere that they have access to the internet. So in general, once they have internet access, they can run a VPN application, we call it a client, and they'll get prompted for login information. The VPN client, once the information is entered correctly, will connect to the Office network, and they'll have a lot of the same accessibility as if they're in those same four walls. So from here, they can access shared resources such as the servers or the printers. So you could connect to the VPN and you could send a printout to the office from a remote location. Some applications that access data from a shared location may not work well across a VPN connection. So one example of that is QuickBooks. At the office, you might have QuickBooks installed on a computer, and then the company file is sitting on a shared server. If you run QuickBooks from the remote computer and try to access that data across the VPN connection, it can be very, very slow and not very efficient. But we'll talk in a moment about how we can solve that problem. But if you're just accessing files through the File Explorer, VPN works very well. In this configuration, a worker only has access to the network. So if they have any applications on their work computer that they don't have on their remote computer, they won't be able to complete the work even if they have access to the file. So an example of this is that the remote worker might be able to access a PDF file, but they'll need something, they might need to edit it for one reason or another, say remove or add some pages. If they don't have a PDF editor program on their home machine, they won't be able to complete that work. VPN access requires specialized software, that client that we spoke about, but it's generally free or very low cost. And when it's properly configured with the network, you can do network configurations within a computer itself. And so you wouldn't need the client. So there is a couple of ways of making that connection. Specific hardware would be required at the office. Most businesses have the right hardware available to make a VPN connection, but in many cases, licenses are required. It's usually a one-time purchase, usually not very expensive, and it allows for the amount of simultaneous connections that you need. So if you need 15 people simultaneously connecting, you would need 15 of those VPN licenses. We gave VPN security a rating of 9. The protocols that are used to make and keep the connection are very sophisticated. They're very hard to crack. And we also gave it an efficiency rating better than email, a rating of 5, because now, again, you are able to get in, the remote workers are able to get in and get to those files that are stored in the on-premise locations. VPN will allow remote workers direct access to the data information that they need to be productive. As you can see, these infrastructures are kind of becoming a little bit more efficient and adding a lot of available and capability. So kind of that next step up in terms of infrastructures is third-party services that offer the ability to remotely control a computer. So these services allow you to control a computer as if you were sitting in front of it. Most of the services allow local peripherals like scanners and printers to be accessed from the remote machine. So when you're remoted into the office machine, but you've got a printer locally, you can print to your local computer that's sitting right next to you, even though you are remotely connected to the computer at the office. Types of services that offer this kind of third-party control are called or are TeamViewer, Log Me In, or Go to My PC. Basically, the process for getting into the setup is you are on the remote, you're on the computer that you want to remote control. You create an account with one of these services with the TeamViewer, Log Me In, or Go to My PC. Once you've created that account, you then install a piece of software, an agent, a connector onto that Office computer. Once that's there and installed and it's confirmed operating correctly, that's all you have to do there. Now from your remote computer, your home computer, you would log into the remote control service through a web browser. Once you successfully logged in, you then would see that remote machine in some sort of representation, either as a graphic or as in a list. You would click on that, and now you would become directly connected, and you can remote control that computer so that when you move the mouse locally, it's going to move the mouse on the remote control or the pointer on the remote control machine. When you type on the local keyboard, it's going to type on that one. We found that the cost of these services vary greatly, from a few dollars up to tens of dollars a month. And so some of the features are kind of across the board too. More expensive ones are providing more features. We gave the platform, this platform option, a security rating of 6 out of 10. As you can see in the diagram, authentication and connectivity runs through a third-party server. So you go from that, in this graphic we're showing a laptop, you go up through a server which is kind of sitting in a cloud or a hosting service before you kind of come back down and remote control. So what that's done is it's actually added another attack surface to your digital footprint. So that's why the security rating is where it's at. These are secure. They generally are not being hacked, but it does open up some level of vulnerability. We gave it an efficiency rating of 7 because the experience should be very similar if you're sitting in front of the computer. There might be some differences, however, in the services in terms of, can you use multiple screens or not? Do you have a large screen at the office, but a small screen on your computer, and you might have to do a little bit of scrolling around in order to get to everything that you need to. Also, you wouldn't be able to get access to some services like microphones and speakers on that remote machine. So if you're going to do a webinar like we are on today, that webinar would have to be done on the local machine because some of those services wouldn't come through that remote connection. But this is a very decent option for small businesses that don't have real rigorous security needs or requirements. If we want to add some security, we then can do a combination of the VPN that we talked about earlier, along with what's called remote desktop. It might be called RDP or RDS. The remote desktop features generally come at no additional cost on computers that are running Windows 10 Professional. Mac users can use remote VNC, which is a client that might be around $30. So you can still have this same kind of remote connectivity. Bear in mind, though, that using the infrastructure, using either this infrastructure or the third-party infrastructure that we just spoke about earlier, that remote computer needs to be dedicated, meaning only one person can remote control that computer at a time. So if you have 3 people remoting in, there needs to be 3 computers at the office available for those folks. We gave the infrastructure a higher security rating than the third-party service because it makes a direct connection to your network. So you can see here, the hardware device is one that's right there local in your office. And so we're making a direct connection to that. So we're not bouncing through a third-party server. We gave it an efficiency rating similar to the third-party services, although some people have stated that when they've changed from using the third-party service to go to this arrangement, they actually find it to be a little bit more efficient, a little bit easier to use, and gives them more of that, hey, I'm sitting in front of my office computer feel. As we mentioned before, there are certain applications that don't work well over VPN only. In this case, since the application is running on the remote machine designated as Office in this diagram, you shouldn't have any problems working with that particular application. Again, going back to the QuickBooks example, Now you are actually running QuickBooks on the remote machine, on the office machine. You're not bringing all of that data all the way across. You're just bringing that remote control screen across, and so now you are able to use those kind of packages in that remote connection. Now, cloud applications allow for on-demand availability of computer applications and data storage without needing the app or the data to be installed locally. So you're getting to these applications generally through a browser. A familiar example of this could be something like Office 365 or Google G Suite. Although cloud application services are convenient, likely not all applications that you use at your business have a cloud equivalent. Most line of business applications, which are niche applications, are specific to a certain business or trade. They don't have a cloud equivalent. We're starting to see more and more of those applications go to the cloud, but that would be one thing that you would want to consider is, can you run all or most of your major applications through a cloud server or just using a cloud application? Most cloud applications don't have data security fully enabled out of the box. So even though Office 365 and Google G Suite can be very secure, you need to know how to set those security settings. So we suggest that you consult your IT department or have an independent review done to ensure that you have the right security levels in place that align with your business security needs. Cloud-hosted applications allow for ease of access on any device with a solid internet connection. So that could be a mobile device, home computer, or a computer that you're borrowing from a friend. With this ease of access comes some security vulnerabilities. Therefore, we've given the cloud application a range of 5 to 8 on the security rating side. Again, it's a range because we can tighten that up a little bit, and then an efficiency rating of 7. One of the more emerging type infrastructures is virtual desktop. So this is where you get a full desktop experience through a virtual connection. So through a web connection, you get the full desktop. So you get access to all applications, whether those applications are cloud capable applications or not, you would get your full desktop experience. So the desktop in this case basically lives on a secure server, and it could be a hosted server in your own environment, in your own office, or it might be hosted with cloud. So with this solution, you're able to log into a desktop on any device with an internet connection, allowing full remote desktop experience without being tied to your hardware. Since everything is centrally located, stored, and secured, virtual desktop eliminates the need to install and update patches and applications, backup files, and scan for viruses on individual client devices. So it also is a security. If you are accessing the virtual desktop through a laptop and the laptop gets stolen, there's nothing on the laptop locally. That laptop was only being used as it was only being used as a tool to access the virtual desktop. So this work is all handled on the server that's hosting the desktops. Virtual desktops can provide greater security to the organization as employees aren't carrying around confidential company data on those devices. The information is also not tied to a mobile device that could easily be lost, stolen, or tampered with. We gave virtual desktop a security rating of 9. The service that is used to connect to the virtual desktop is secure as well, and the ability to keep information off the local devices is built into the definition of the virtual desktop. Efficiency, we rated at 8. As long as you have a solid internet connection, this solution is almost seamless. I just wanted to do a quick mention of two-factor authentication. So most of the infrastructures that we discussed should allow you to add two-factor authentication, or 2FA, in order to approve security. 2FA is meant to confirm you are who you are. When you log into a secure process, you enter your user ID and password as you would usually, but before you gain access, a code is either sent to your email. You might get a call to a number that you have, a phone number that you have put into the two-factor system, and when you pick up the phone, it'll start telling you what the code is, or you might have access to a synchronized app on your mobile device, which is constantly displaying a different and new code about every 30 seconds that is synchronized with the service. And so when you enter that code, the login process is complete, and whatever you needed to get to, whether it's VPN, secure cloud-based file storage, or the virtual desktops, as an example, you'll then now be able to get into that. So if you haven't enabled two-factor authentication on any of these infrastructures that you're already using, be sure to do that, and us or your IT specialist would be able to help with that. And we have everything turned on two-factor. Slows things down just a little bit, but you feel a lot better knowing that you've got that security through that two-factor authentication. So that really kind of concludes the infrastructure part of our presentation that is typically used by remote workers, or can be deployed to help the remote workers. What I want to do now is share with you a few solutions that are focused on taking your work at home, your remote work, to the next level, ensuring a high standard of professionalism. So let's take a look at the internet services first. With any remote access solution, internet service is going to be very important because we're using the internet to make those connections. Not only the internet in your house, but the internet in the office as well. However, internet service on both ends needs to be reliable and broad enough. It needs to have a high enough speed. If there's a high volume of workers that are remoting into the office network, you may experience some slowness without enough upload speed. We can assist you in looking at what your current speeds are and if they're appropriate for your use. Even with high speeds, you may still experience issues with service outages and times where there will be high traffic. In order to offset these interruptions, you can deploy software-defined wide area network, or SD-WAN. SD-WAN can be integrated into your router, or another piece of hardware can be used. It will allow for the failover and load balance using the best ISP needs at the time. So you're plugging multiple internet services into your infrastructure and utilizing the capability across all those internet services. We typically see two different types of internet services being used, but we've seen 3 and 4 be plugged into SD-WAN, adding to the capability. With the solid network at the office, you should need at home or from the remote location a minimum of 50 megabytes per second download and 10 megabytes per second upload internet service. So again, both sides need to have adequate capability, and so home workers will want to take a look at that if you know that your office network is operating as it should. Many offices have already made the switch to voice over IP. However, not all VoIP systems are the same. Many of the VoIP providers allow for pick up and go, where you can take your phone off your desk in the office and plug it in anywhere that you work from, anywhere that you can plug into the internet. This makes working at home much easier. If your VoIP provider does not allow for this, many VoIP systems allow for apps to be installed on your computer or your mobile device, which basically replicates your phone. So if that's the case and your phone rings at the office, the phone is basically going to ring on this app, whether it's installed on your computer or your mobile device. Both solutions allow for use of an office phone number to call from, and one that is seen by your clients. So your clients and prospects won't think twice, and it will look like you're working from the office. So if you're at the house and you dial out to the client, the caller ID is going to show the office telephone number, even though you're calling from the house. As long as you don't have something like birds chirping in the background or dogs barking or kids playing, they're going to feel like you're just calling directly from the office. Lastly, VoIP systems allow for analytics as well. So things like the number of calls that are made, call duration, and you can even add encryption communication. So if you're calling from one voice over IP system to another, and you need that communication to be secure, as long as you've got compatibility on both sides, that can be an encrypted communication and cannot be hacked. It's important, obviously, that when you're in a remote location that we still kind of communicate and collaborate with the team and clients and prospects when you're working from home. So applications such as Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Hangouts, and their recently introduced product called Meet all allow for internet and some external communications, internal and some external communications. Depending on your current plan of G Suite or Office 365, this application may not have any additional cost. It might already be built into the plan that you are using in those services. These applications, with these applications, you can use instant messaging, you can set up video conferencing, you can make voice calls, and some allow for collaboration and performing real-time editing on a shared document. As an example, as Breck and I were working through this particular webinar and this PowerPoint presentation from remote locations, we both at the same time were able to edit this document, and we were able to see the edits that each other were making. So we were kind of able to contribute not only verbally, but by action, adding graphics, putting on bullet points and so forth. And it really did enhance our ability to get this pulled together in rapid fashion. Some communication applications have free or trial versions. So if you don't have any of those particular platforms like Office 365 or G Suite, you might still be able to get access to these particular applications. The free versions might be limited, but you're still going to get a lot of helpful capability out of them. Now, mobile devices such as phones and laptops are one of the most efficient devices used in business world today. However, they can raise a high risk to the company. Lost or stolen devices can pose a big risk to your data. When employees leave, data can be misused when not taken care of properly, which is another scenario. A bring your own device or a BYO policy is helpful, but offers little actual control to your company's security. Implementing mobile device management, or MDM, can put in place electronic and automated security. If a phone is lost or stolen, the device can be wiped remotely. If an employee is terminated, the device can be locked. We can also limit what applications get installed onto that device, and we can limit how that device gets connected to the internet. So there's a lot of control over the full security and the accessibility of those devices. Probably a little bit more if the company owns the device. So if the company doesn't own the device, MDM can still be applied. We can allow for basically carving out a space on the personal device that the company has control of. So MDM would have control of that space and most of the control policies that fall within that space. And so one example is that if the employee leaves the organization, the MDM can basically remote wipe just that space that got carved out, leaving the rest of the phone and all of the personal information intact, but now you're able to kind of recapture and recontrol any information that had been on that phone. We've been getting a lot of questions about productivity assurance. In a mobile workforce, managers and executives can worry about team productivity, particularly if the company is traditionally a co-located one, or they don't have productivity measures as part of their current operations. If you're new to cloud applications, adoption measures are also available through most cloud application services, looking at things such as usage time and the number of created assets. So if you do deploy something like file sharing or collaboration, you can see how well people are adopting and adapting to those new services that you've deployed to help with the connectivity and to help with the collaboration. With the use of company-owned devices and third-party applications, companies can also monitor their employees' productivity. Studies have shown that when employees know that their counterparts are being productive, they tend to be more productive themselves. We can use some of these productivity applications to publish dashboards of metrics and measurements that are showing the entire team how productive they're being. Some of these actually add some kind of gamification to it as well. So, you know, if you have a lot of volume of certain things that need to be produced, you know, you can display that volume on the dashboard and people can work to, you know, achieve certain levels, might be able to get awards and rewards as well. So these productivity applications are very helpful, again, particularly if you've got this disparate workforce that you might not be in contact with in a ready fashion. So thank you all very much for taking the time to review the available remote workforce infrastructures and some of the additional work enhancement solutions. I'm going to kind of wrap things up, but you know, while I'm doing that, make sure that you submit any kind of questions that you have into the webinar chat, and I'll get those answered momently. But just to kind of review, we talked about email as a good communication platform, but not efficient at document sharing and retrieval. We discussed file sharing and VPN as a way to improve the ability to access company documents, but it might not solve all the problems due to the fact that not all business applications might be available on the remote machine. Solving the application access problem was presented through three infrastructures: third-party remote control services, VPN and remote control applications, as well as virtual desktops. In the topic of other solutions to improve the remote worker experience, we talked about internet service improvements that can be made at the office and remote location. The office can add SD-WAN as a way to combine multiple internet services to keep access available in one, or if one or the other internet solutions goes down temporarily, and it can share bandwidth between the two internet services, increasing capability. Voice over IP phone systems can be used to present an at-work office phone system experience, while collaboration platforms such as Teams and Slack are great ways to allow teams to collaborate and chat with colleagues and clients. Mobile device management can improve the security of the company data and trade secrets, while productivity monitoring and measuring solutions can ensure remote teams are working efficiently. So again, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. Hopefully you were able to gain some more understanding about the platforms that you're using and maybe platforms that you want to adopt. Breck, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we had a couple come in. The first question that we have is, does a VPN service work the same way as the VPN you described?
It works similar to that, but not exactly the same. So a VPN service, we recommend that to remote workers that might be connecting to the internet, not even connecting back to the office, but they're just making a connection to the internet. So if they're at a Starbucks, if they're at an airport, which we'll be seeing more and more of that in the weeks and the months to come. A VPN service ensures that their connection on that open public Wi-Fi, as an example, is secure. So it will make a connection to a known server that the service like NordVPN or CyberGhost is providing to you. That's a known connection, and then you'll connect out to the internet from there, so that no one will be able to spoof the local Wi-Fi, or they'll be able to jump on your non-secure protection because that Wi-Fi is open. So there is some similarities, but the difference is you're not connecting directly to your office network.
Okay. Another question that came in is, how can I view the speed of my internet in my office?
Great question. There's a few different speed detection services that you can get to on the internet. So just open up your browser. You can go to one that we use quite often is called Speed Test, SPEEDTEST.net. And that'll open up a new window. There'll be a pretty simple interface. There'll be a button on there. It might say something like Start Test. You'll give that a press. It'll give you 3 different parameters. It's going to give you latency. Some people call it a ping test. That's basically the amount of time that it takes for you to get to the test server and back. Anything under about 20 milliseconds is very good. So it'll come back in milliseconds. So if you get, some services are very low. They might be 1 or 2 or 3. Usually fiber services are very low. But ideally anything less than 20 milliseconds is a good number there. It'll then give you the download speed. That's how quickly information can be, or how much information over a certain amount of time can be brought down from the internet. And then it'll give you an upload speed. And so again, if you're at your house doing that speedtest.net, look for something less than 20 milliseconds. Look for that first number to be 50 megabytes per second, or sorry, megabits per second or higher. And look for that third number to be 10 megabits per second or higher.
Perfect. Another one that came in is, what are the pros and cons of VPN versus connecting to a server set up in a data center, or VPN versus a cloud-based application?
So a lot of them will use the same protocols, and so you should get a similar level of service. If you are connecting to a data center, you're typically going to be using a VPN connection. So you're either going to have that client on your machine, you're going to have VPN configured on the network. The last mode that might occur, whether it's a cloud service or one of those data centers, is a secure socket layer connection, an SSL connection. And the way that you'll know that you've got that SSL connection is if you're making that through a browser, you'll see your address will be HTTPS rather than just HTTP. And a lot of browsers will also show a lock. And if that lock is in the locked position, you know that you've got a secure connection to the location that you're trying to connect to. So you're going to get a lot of the same type of connectivity, but again, typically a data center is going to have a VPN component associated with it.
Okay, it looks like right now we have 2 more questions, unless anyone else submits any more questions. The next question is going to be, What is the difference between remote desktop with the VPN setup and a virtual desktop?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's a lot of similarities to that. It just really comes down to where you're getting access to the desktop, so that the capabilities are very similar. You just have a little bit more flexibility with the virtual desktop. So in the case of the VPN with remote desktop with RDP, you've got a dedicated machine, a physical machine that you're remoting into. So again, you've got a desktop or a laptop that's sitting at the office that then becomes dedicated for you to remote into. So now you've got the computer at the office and you've got a computer at your house. You basically need two computers in order for that to work. In the case of virtual desktop, that computer is actually being hosted somewhere, whether it's being hosted on a server within the office, or it's being hosted in some data center, or it could be hosted in a cloud service, and you're not having another piece of hardware that you're relying on. So it's sitting in those locations, and you'll have that same Windows experience that you do if it was an actual physical machine. And then you might have a little bit more flexibility in that with the virtual desktops, you're usually able to get to those with those secure browser connections. And so you might not necessarily need the VPN service on the remote machine in order to gain access, although that really depends on how it got deployed and different security needs that you might have.
Perfect. And the last question that we have is, can you remote wipe a laptop if it is stolen?
Yes, you can. You've got to have the services in place before that happens. That mobile device management infrastructure can be used for the remote wipe, but there's other services that are available from Microsoft and other providers that would allow for the remote wipe capability. What would happen is that remote wipe would happen the next time a connection to the internet occurred. In order to fully protect a laptop from it being stolen, or not from it being stolen, but once it is stolen, for the information, the data to get out, you want to make sure that the data is encrypted on your machine, and you want to have a whole drive encryption where when you go to log in, even before it boots into Windows, you have a code that comes up that says, basically, we're looking for the right code to unlock the drive so that we can boot into Windows. So get encryption, whole drive encryption on your machine, and then deploy one of these services that allow for remote wipe.
Perfect. And that was the last question that we had. So I wanted to go ahead and take this moment to thank everyone that is watching today and for coming in to our webinar. And Dave, did you have anything else to say?
I appreciate everybody's time. Breck, thank you very much for manning the ship behind the scenes and fielding all those questions. We will be having more webinars upcoming that provide helpful hints and tips and introduces you to different applications that again ensure that your infrastructure and your information is secure and adding efficiency to your workforce. So until then, goodbye and thank you for joining today.